Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. So, we now know it's just kind of broken before I was about to start this video, which was very helpful, although I had a very slight heads up that it was coming, that Antonio Conte will be in the dugout for Tottenham's match against Wolverhampton Wanderers this weekend. I don't know why I said Wolverhampton in such a weird way, but I did. So that's great news. And also, obviously, a lot of Chelsea fans clearly very unhappy because Thomas Tuchel did get a match ban, or touchline ban, which is currently suspended for his part in the scenes after the final whistle at Stamford Bridge at the weekend. I think it's fair, I'll be honest. I think I said this in the last video. Essentially, Tuchel was the agitator in that situation at the end. Conte just wanted to shake his hand, move on, and he grabbed his hand, held him, and it kind of really led to what happened next. So I'm presuming that's the way the FA saw it, or technically it's an independent commission. They met today and discussed it. The two managers had until the end of yesterday, Thursday, to give their kind of take whether they were going to appeal or not against the charge, or sorry, contest the charge. And Conte, well, pretty much said in his press conference, and it was confirmed to us afterwards, that he wasn't going to contest his charge. He was going to accept it. And it's ended in a fine. So Conte's ended up with a £15,000 fine. And Tuchel has got, I think it was £35,000 fine, and this currently suspended touchline ban, because I think I'll tell you what, I'll read out exactly what the FA has said so you've got it. So an FA spokesman said, an independent regulatory commission has today ordered that Thomas Tuchel be fined £35,000 and banned from the touchline for one match, and Antonio Conte be fined £15,000 after they respectively breached FA Rule E3. I think E3, if I remember correctly, is bringing the game into disrepute. Thomas Tuchel and Antonio Conte admitted that their behaviour after the final whistle of the Premier League game between Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur on Sunday 14th of August was improper, and both managers requested a paper hearing. So presumably that's not an in-person hearing. These sanctions are subject to appeal, and Thomas Tuchel's one-match touchline ban has been suspended temporarily pending the independent regulatory commission's written reasons for its decisions that will be made available in due course. I think the FA are also investigating Tuchel separately for the comments he made about Anthony Taylor after the game as well, the referee. So Spurs fans very happy, of course, that Conte will be in charge in the dugout at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium tomorrow against Wolves, and Chelsea fans less happy, of course. Twitter, social media is an absolute mess right now, as both sides' fans are obviously taking a pop at each other. But it's good news. And like I say, I do think it's fair. Ultimately, I don't know why either manager really got a red card for it. I still think that was ridiculous. And we had the strange thing afterwards of kind of, all of us as journalists started to look through all the rule books and understand it all. And in essence, a red card for a manager, especially after the final whistle, doesn't technically mean a ban for the next game. You know, as we've exactly seen, that Conte has not got one, which is strange, isn't it? It's a different process for managers and players, because I guess, you know, if a manager gets one, he's sent to the stands during a game. It's all very different for managers and players. But yeah, I think it's worked out the way that clearly Tottenham wanted it to, and obviously it's not a cheap punishment by any means, a £15,000 fine, especially for, you know, the likes of us, but I'm sure Conte probably would have taken that rather than the touchline ban, which it looks like, unless he appeals and wins, which I don't know whether he would or not, especially as he accepted it in the first place by the sounds of that statement, Tuchel. Yeah, I'd imagine that'll happen at some point. I'm not sure. They would have had Leeds, so he would have been banned for that one. So I don't know entirely I'm not entirely sure what their next fixture is. But obviously, we're talking about Spurs. Conte in the clear, as it were, which is great news, and he can just crack on, continuing to be passionate on the touchline, but without, hopefully, bringing the game into disrepute. Funnily enough, at his press conference yesterday, he'd had his little say about what was to come, so I'll read that to you quickly. He said, I see that the FA made us, both coaches, more soft charge. No, I think he's saying it was a charge over nothing is kind of what he's seemingly saying. And we have to accept and have respect for every decision, but I think sometimes this type of situation can happen. It's not the first time, it won't be the last time that two coaches are not in the right way or do not agree, but the most important thing is we have to move on, to have respect for each other, and for me, the situation finishes there. And then when he was asked whether he expected to be on the touchline against Wolves, he said, I hope so. I think that it's right. It's right to stay in my place. Then I repeat, for sure, after this type of situation, you can learn a lot. But at the same time, I think that for many situations, I was really good to keep calm and don't have an excessive reaction in the situation. I wonder there whether he's speaking about Tuchel rushing past him down the touchline to celebrate. Because I think, well, I said before about that Instagram story post that Conte put out, which, yes, I would have been very intrigued to see what happened if he'd realised he was there in the moment rather than later on saying he would have tripped him up. I actually wonder whether he might have tripped him up. Oh my goodness, I think we might have been looking at a very different scenario then in the moment. But as it is, that's where we're at. Antonio Conte in charge in the dugout tomorrow at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And yeah, especially if they win, but no doubt during the game as well, I think he'll get a very big ovation from the Spurs fans. Yeah, being very happy that he's there. So yes, the rest of the press conference, what else do we had? We had the Cristian Romero news. So this is going to be an interesting topic because there's a fair few sides to this. So Cristian Romero, on Wednesday, I got word that he'd suffered an injury during the Chelsea game towards the end, which obviously none of us were really aware of at the time. And I was told that he would be out. It was a muscle injury, and that he would be out for potentially 3 weeks, maybe 4. So obviously I reported that. And I must stress as well, because I think people think you just kind of pluck these from anywhere. On this one, you know, I can say this. I had 3 different sources told me that before I wrote it, and I had it confirmed twice by people within Tottenham Hotspur. So this isn't a case of me just going, what am I going to write today? It was very much a very heavily sourced, like you've always heard me say in the past, I always double source stuff, but technically this in all had 5 different people confirming or bringing it to me in the first place. So yeah, it was very, very well sourced. But obviously the other side to this, and of course I 100% understand this side to it as well, is Cristian Romero is a player who just wants to play football. And Conte will come to his quote in a minute, but you know, Conte even said that Romero just wanted to play even this weekend with this injury. And so obviously very quickly his camp put it out there to Argentinian journalists that not only was it not a muscle injury, it was. Conte confirmed that later on. But also he would be back within 2 weeks, which is obviously, you know, we're only talking about, what, a week less, and I said 3 weeks, maybe 4. So if it's 2 weeks, it's a week less. Some people getting very excited on social media about the difference between a week. But, you know, it's a difficult one of these. I hope, 100%, I hope, because I love Cristian Romero as a player, of course, and he's a very important player. I hope that he is back within that time frame and you know, and he's back for the Forest match next weekend. I really hope he is. But very much it seems to be one of these, what's coming out, the word that's coming out of what Tottenham and the word that's coming out from the player side of things. And I knew exactly which way Antonio Conte was going to go in the press conference. I already knew that he was going to, of course, side with the players' point of view, which is absolutely his right to do. Very similar to Jose Mourinho in that aspect, that the two of them, and I get this 100% as well. The player, they say the player should know their own body. And if the player feels that he's ready to play or his injury isn't that serious, then, you know, you trust them because they know their body. And also, Conte, as we know, is very much someone that likes to push the timeframes a little bit and push the medical department because, you know, Spurs have a history, of course, of having players that those injuries have gone on a little longer than managers have wanted or players have wanted for a variety of reasons. So yes, I knew that in the press conference, the Romero side of things, and I think didn't he like a tweet from one of the Argentinian journalists saying that he'd be back within 2 weeks? I think it was back in training within 10 days from this point, from that point, so the Wednesday. I think it was he was going to be back before the Forest game anyway, was what they were saying, and he liked that. So of course, absolutely, the player believes he'll be back, and the player puts himself forward, and he feels he's fit, and the medical department do give him the green light. Then brilliant, that's a good thing, because there's a run of games coming up very quickly after that, in terms of we go back to 2 matches or 3 matches technically in a week. You've got the first Champions League game, you've got the Man City match as well. So 100% want Cristian Romero back. But I just found it quite funny that there's a little divide and maybe what the club, people within the club feel about it. And also, it's I don't want to go too deep into it, but the variety of where the information was coming from, the different sources, is quite interesting as well. Lots of people were speaking about it within the club, within the squad. And obviously Cristian Romero has this view on it, and Conte has a very similar view, and hopefully the two of them are quite right, and that Romero goes straight back out there. But we shall see. I'll give you Conte's quote anyway. Here's what he said. Christian had a little problem during the game against Chelsea in the final part of the game, but it's a little problem. After the game, he started to feel a bit of pain in his adductor muscle. We checked him, and honestly, the player wanted to give his availability, but in this type of situation especially, as we have a lot of games to play, it would be stupid to take a risk. For this reason, for the game against Wolverhampton, he's not available. So it's one of those. He's kind of hinting, essentially, almost pretty much saying that it's only the game against Wolverhampton he'll be out, which would be fantastic if it is. But he's not technically saying that. He didn't say, but he'll be back for Forest. So it's one of those where it's probably leaving the door slightly ajar for himself in case Romero isn't ready for the Forest game. Because, if he's not ready for Forest, then you're looking at West Ham. And then we are taking it up towards that 3 weeks mark, 2.5, 3 weeks. I'm trying to remember what there's a run of fixtures after that. That's when it starts to get a little bit packed. But, we'll see. We'll see. Like I say, I hope that Romero is right. I really do, because not that Davinson Sanchez, who'll probably fill in, is anyway a bad player, and Spurs kept 3 clean sheets in those 3 matches at the end of the season. So I'm sure he'll fit in very well on that right-hand side. But Romero's top class. He is going to be one of the best defenders in the world, I reckon, quite soon. Especially if he continues to develop and just curb some of those little ways he has about him. It's fascinating to see how the whole injury thing played out this week. And I appreciate social media always will want to believe the positive thing that they want to believe. And I get that. And I see that all the time with transfers. Look, I've had this in the past. When I've said a transfer isn't happening, people get very annoyed and go, oh, whatever they come out with these kids, he's tier 100, he doesn't know what he's talking about, fraud, all this sort of stuff. But, they don't come back when the transfer doesn't happen and say, oh, yeah, you're right. Because I get it. In the moment, you don't want it to be true that something isn't happening. You want to sign Carlos Kikabalio. You want that player to come in the door. And it's the same with injuries. If I'm hearing from a lot of people that it's a minimum 3 weeks, but the players' side of things is definitely saying the opposite. And, there's not much you can do about that. There's not much. I can only report what I know. And the Argentinian journalists will report what they know. Like I said, they were all reporting that it wasn't a muscle injury. Conte has since confirmed it is an adductor muscle injury. We'll see what happens. Fingers crossed, Romero is back very quickly. This is one of those instances where I would love for my time frame to be completely wrong. I would love it to be. And hopefully it is. And because I want to see him back in action as soon as possible. The other interesting thing is, I know it happened during the game. I saw the Argentinian reports were saying that it's because of the Cucurella challenge. It may well be. I think the adductor is in your groin, isn't it? I think that was roughly... I must admit, I didn't even include that in the last video because I wasn't aware of it. During the match, none of us in the press really saw that. Maybe a couple did, but I didn't see it. It was only kind of when I watched back bits and pieces on the internet that I saw the Cucurella challenge. I've only seen the photo, to be fair. I haven't even seen the video, so I don't really know how it played out or anything. But certainly it looks like his studs are going into the groin area, which sounds weirder than it's meant to. So that may well be that's done some damage to that adductor muscle in that moment. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I guess what we'll know at the press conference ahead of the Forest game, which I think will be on Thursday next week. So we'll kind of know then if Romero has made himself available and the medical department said he's available, then brilliant news, and he'll be back. And if it has to be a little bit longer, then it is a little bit longer, which I think was probably their original time frame. But honestly, it won't be the first time and it will not be the last time that maybe a player and the club have different views on their recovery time frame and the seriousness of injuries. Saw a few last season at Spurs that went exactly that way as well. So fingers crossed, good news on Romero. Hopefully, hopefully we get some good news on Romero and that Conte's words do mean that he is just out for the Wolverhampton match. I think the other thing that needs to be said about Romero as well is he is a guy that will just essentially patch himself up and get back out there. I've watched him in matches. You clearly can see his knees been bothering him, but he's been continuing to play on. He is a warrior. So if there's any way that the medical department say to him, okay, well, you can play. You're going to be in pain, but you can play. You crack on, but it's not going to make it any worse. They will let him go out there. And as Conte said, it would be a risk if he played this weekend, which suggests there is some element of doing more damage if he plays. So that's really where they need to be, isn't it, before the Forest game, is to know that it won't cause any more damage if he plays. He might be in a bit of pain, but the key is not worsening a potential serious injury, I guess. Let's see what happens with that. But staying on Romero, Conte was asked, I think it was Dan Kilpatrick from The Standard asked him about, that other side to Romero, excuse me, the hair pulling, obviously we saw on Cucurella as well. Just that slightly, I guess his nastier slide, nasty is probably not the best way to put it, although Conte does call various players nasty in a good sense. That competitive edge, that's probably the best way to put it. And he was asked about that, and does he like that? So did he like to see stuff like the hair pulling stuff? And his answer was quite interesting. He said, about Cristian, I speak a lot with him. For sure, he's a player who's really strong physically. He has no fear of anyone, but for sure he has to be always really focused to understand the situation, to try to always be better, to improve the situations he needs to improve. But I speak a lot with him. I speak a lot with my players about being strong, but always in a good way. And that goes back, you've probably heard me say this before. If you ask Conte about Romero, it always goes a very similar way. He always say, look, he's a very important player for us, but that's kind of where the praise ends. And he'll always then talk about the stuff he needs to improve. I think it's a case of keeping him grounded. And it is a case of knowing that, Romero does have this way about him where he can tread a fine line between brilliance and being a little bit of a lunging liability. And I think once he's only 24, once he learns the difference between those moments, and he's starting to read the game incredibly well, but there are moments where he just gets that timing slightly off. And I think once he gets that focus 100%, as I say, it's going to be one of the best around. And Conte clearly believes that he'll get him there as well. Because don't forget, he would have been, Serie A Defender of the Year in the year that Conte won it Serie A with Inter. So he would be fully aware of how class Romero is. And funnily enough, keeping on that kind of nasty side to things, what's the best way to put it? That winning, the winning mentality, the aggression, the being tougher. Conte was asked does he want to, I think this was Dan's other question, does he see them becoming his embodiment on the pitch? We know what Conte's like. He's a winner. He will do everything within a sporting sense to win a match. So, he was asked, is he seeing that in his team now? We saw what happened at Chelsea. Spurs probably didn't deserve to win it. Didn't deserve to even get a point, but they managed to. And that was kind of because of that mentality, I guess, of showing a bit more aggression, especially as the second half wore on, because they were quite passive before that. And he said, "This is a step that I continue to ask of my players. For sure, we did a little step forward, but we need to continue to complete this step, because to be nasty is very important. Very important. It means that you need to feel the blood of your opponent and try in a sporting way to kill your opponent. You have to understand, when you go to play a game, you can draw also, but at the same time, you have to understand if the draw is a success for you or if the draw is like a loss. If you want to have ambition, I think you have to think only to get 3 points, and the draw is half a loss for me. I'm trying to transfer my idea, this feeling, it's important. If you want to be competitive, to have ambition to fight for something important, you have to improve in many aspects. Also, your character has to be strong, and you have to understand very well the difference between a win, a draw, and a loss. It's totally different. The win makes you happy, the feeling is good, the confidence goes up. When you lose, for you, you should have the opposite situation." So essentially what he's saying is, don't celebrate draws, because you should be believing that you should win every game. And yes, the Spurs players obviously were very excited when they drew the game. And to be fair, Conte was as well. It was a 96th minute leveller, which felt like a winner. But what he's saying, it's true. It's getting into this scenario that the real, I guess, top pros to do, that, you know, they should be believing they should win that game, not rescuing a point. I still do believe that at times even the top teams, there are good points, and that, you know, they'll take them from the situation they were in, and ultimately they prove to be important points. But 100% understand what he's saying is, if he can get that mentality in his players, that they just need to win. They need to win at all costs in a sporting way, as he says. Then, you know, they'll just have that mentality, and it will take them over the line more often in games. So, yeah, completely understand that. There was good news, injury news, on Oliver Skipp. I reported, funnily enough, a little bit before the Romero thing. I reported that Oliver Skipp was making progress, and he was hoping to be back outdoors and running, which is a huge thing. If you weren't aware, obviously Oliver Skipp got a hairline fracture in his heel, and also very, very unpleasant cut, which required a lot of stitches. So yeah, I was told that he was about to kind of head back out into outdoor running, is probably the best way to work. Outdoor work's another good one. And Conte confirmed that on Thursday in the press conference. He said, and lots of nice words about Skippy as well. He said, "The other player not available for Wolverhampton is Skipp, but good news about him, because," I think he might have called him Skippy, "but good news about him because today or tomorrow he will run again. This is really good news. I hope this player is to be a bit lucky, because since January he started to have a problem. But I think hopefully he will be ready quickly. We need his performance. He's a really good guy, and for sure he's suffering a lot to stay outside." I think he means of the team. But he doesn't lock the door on him, left him outside Hotspur way. But I think for the period where we have to play a lot of games, he will be available, which is really good news for us. This is the thing, I do think people underestimate, and there's a guy that always in the comments on these YouTube videos goes, "Skippy watch," and puts the time that I talk about Oliver Skipp. And the reason I maybe talk about him a lot is because he's a very good young player. And I think Spurs fans should be very excited, proud, pleased, I guess, to have him within their squad. And Conte really likes him. You cannot overestimate. Don't know which one it is there. Conte loves him. Honestly, he really, really rates him very, very highly. And like I said, I just get this feeling that it's Højbjerg or Skipp and Bentancur or Basuma. I think that it almost feels like they're the partnerships that he's decided upon, just because of the blend of the different skill sets of those four players. So, the fact that you can tell, honestly, you could tell in the room the excitement in his voice when he was talking about Skippy coming back. He has the potential to be a real Conte player. I do wonder whether Conte sees a little bit of himself in him. You know, when Conte was a player. I do wonder that. But it'd be great to have Skippy back. And that squad is going to be a bustling squad with lots of people. There are going to be people missing out on that matchday squad a lot. And we're going to constantly be having these discussions of, why is this player? Why is player A or B or C not on the bench? What's Conte's problem with them? We're going to have a lot of those, and that's purely because the amount of quality I think there's going to be to fit in this squad. Spoke about transfers as well. He was asked, I think it was Michael Bridge from Sky asked him essentially about the players heading out the door, but also does he want more players in to replace? And that, to be fair, I think he was. I don't want to get the question exactly right. So he was asked about the players going out the door, and then he was asked, "Are you looking for more players to come in?" So Conte's answer was, "We're okay, but if someone goes away, for sure another player has to come. Especially if some players want to go to play regularly. It's difficult to keep them here, but at the same time, it has to be very clear that if a player wants to go and play, I have to replace this player. This is very important. We need to have a squad capable to face a lot of games until November. This is very important for me." Right. My take on that, I think in that exact quote, he was talking about Bryan Gil. I don't think, and there's others, let me explain. So I don't think he was talking about the unwanted quartet, as it were, or the bomb squad, as they've been called, and some of the press boys call them, because they've been bombed out. I don't think he's talking about those four because they weren't in his plans anyway. They were already informed that they weren't part of his squad, and so you're not replacing players there. They are players who are heading out the door because they need to, and also get some money off the wages, bring in a little bit of a fee. So if you weren't already aware, Giovanni Lo Celso, they kind of snuck out the announcement after the Chelsea game. He's headed off to Villarreal, back on loan again. No option to buy, but there is a break clause. They can come back in January if Spurs get a bid for him and he agrees to go to whichever club bids for him. So that's Gio out the door. Tongi, I think that got confirmed not too long before I started this video. He has gone to Napoli on loan. There is an option to buy. I think the figures that we're hearing seems to be a 1 million loan fee with a 1 million euro loan fee with a 30 million euro option to buy next summer. It's one of those. I mean, what is 30 million euros in pounds? What's that, about 25, 26 million, maybe slightly more? It's one of those where right now we can look at that and say, with the current way Tongi's been, playing and as his loan on Lyon, no one's going to take that. He has a cracking season in Serie A, 25, 26, 27 million suddenly. That's quite a bargain deal for a player who is incredibly talented and just needs to find his way, as it were. So, yeah, we'll see with that one. And I think they're taking on a fair old whack of his wages as well. So, yeah, Spurs have got them two most... It is desperately ridiculous that their two most expensive players in their history before Richarlison came along of signing have both gone out on loan. But, for a second time within a year as well. But, hey, that's what it is. And obviously, Reguilon, I think we'll see depart quite sharpish as well. And also... Harry Winks will head out the door as well. So I don't think it's those four players that he's talking about replacing. I think it is Bryan Gil. In that quote, I feel that was Gil he was talking about. We call him Bryan Gil, which I think I said before. Adds a new third dimension when we've got Gil, Jill and Gil, which was what I was told was the pronunciation, with a bit of phlegm going everywhere. And I think that is the reason I say it's him. I do think he also probably means Japhet Tanganga. I think if Japhet Tanganga goes, then they definitely bring in another centre-back, and I'd be shocked. Not be shocked, but I'd imagine they'll be looking at options for another centre-back anyway as well, especially if the Romero injury does turn out to be that 3-4 weeks and they need that extra cover. And also possibly Pape Matar Sarr as well, because if Pape Matar Sarr does head out on loan somewhere, then at midfield, you probably need another body unless you're keeping Harvey White around. And even then, does he fully trust him to be that fifth player? He has praised him in the past, so maybe he does as another kind of option. But yeah, I do wonder whether they bring in another body in that case if Sarr were to go out. But yeah, the reason I say that's Gil is just because Hill's been in for both of his first two benches. Tanganga obviously in the second one because of Longlay's injuries. Longlay's fine, by the way, now he's available to play. But yeah, I just wonder, that comment for me sounds like, because Hill would be on the bench, because you need three options for those to... Spurs play with three forwards, as it were. Two number 10s sitting behind Harry Kane. So I do think you need three options to cover for them. As Conte said, he wants two people for every single position. I do think if you lose Hill, you are losing that third option. That is definitely someone that needs to be replaced. And as I've said repeatedly, Spurs have continued to monitor the market for attacking midfielders and strikers. Because obviously in that situation, if Hill were to go, you could bring in an attacking midfielder to be a like-for-like kind of replacement, or you could bring in a striker. And then Richarlison is more your number 10 winger, whatever you want to call it, because it's an awkward one because the width mainly comes from the wing-backs, whereas the wingers occasionally will go out wide, but mostly Conte sees them as number 10s, as he calls them. Like his formation the other day, he called it a 3-4-2-1 rather than 3-4-3. I know they're basically the similar formations, and some people say they are the same formations, but he definitely sees them as number 10 sitting behind Kane. I think this is why I've always said I think we'll see more incomings before the window closes, one, maybe two, because I do think that Conte's been very adamant about the fact that, okay, if you're going to take out numbers from my squad, as in the set squad I have chosen, you're going to have to replace them. And that, for me, especially that line, it has to be very clear that if a player wants to go play, I have to replace this player. And I think he's probably saying that to the board as well, and saying, look, you've done well, lads. 7 new signings. It feels like 17. 7 new signings, obviously with Destiny Udogie heading off back to Udinese. But if you're going to let more players go out the door, there needs to be a couple more coming in as well. I just wanted to... I think Hill, by the way, did I say Valencia? I think are the ones that look like they wanted to take him back again as well. Whether that ends up being a loan or a permanent, we'll find out. I think a permanent would be just the biggest admitting that Spurs made a huge mistake. And it's one of those, I don't think they did make a huge mistake, because I know Conte said physically he's not ready for the Premier League, but also on the flip side, I honestly think that if Hill were to stick around, he would continue to be in this squad, and I think he would help develop him, because I do think, and I'm not alone in this, a lot of the top kind of scouts in Spain believe this, he's going to be one of the best young players around. And I think I've said this before, there was the Barcelona scout, his name I can't remember, it's got German in it, or German. He said that he thought he was the most talented player he'd watched in a match since Neymar. So, there's a very talented player there, but I think if you were to sell him a year later, you are essentially giving up on a very talented young player. For me, I would loan him. I have no say whatsoever, but I would loan him out. And then I would, just see where he's at in a year's time and tell him out there, look, I know the Spanish League maybe doesn't need you to be that physical, but we want you to keep bulking up. We want you to add strength to your play as well. And then you're you're ready. I tell you what, also, Brian Hill is rocking a cracking moustache right now. I was looking at some of the training photos from, when was it, Thursday? Yeah, it was yesterday's training. Brilliant moustache. Absolutely fair play on the moustache. There's a little bit of hair under there, but it is essentially a moustache. Fair play on that. Probably the first time I've ever praised someone's moustache in a video. So there you go. There's a I was going to say a new, I think probably a new low for the videos perhaps. But yeah. The other thing I really wanted to mention as well, only because I didn't really see it till, was it this morning or late last night? I'm trying to remember now. The photo doing the rounds of what looks to be a Chelsea fan doing very, very deeply unpleasant, abhorrent gesture towards Sonny. Obviously, Chelsea have said they're investigating. It just blows my mind that we're still in a world where things like that can happen. I'm not even going to describe what it is, because I just find it's disgusting, quite frankly. And I'd imagine when you've got an image there, it's not going to take long. And to be fair, Chelsea's statement is very, very clear that they will absolutely come down like a ton of bricks on this person if they're identified. And I hope they are, because I don't know what would even possess you to do something like that. Some people might claim that it's in the emotion of a moment or whatever. I'm sorry, but if your emotions of any moment are causing you to do something like that, there's something a little bit deeper rooted there. I don't like that at all. Not that anyone should, but honestly, I don't think any of us were aware of it at the time. I don't know whether it was something that was picked up on TV, and because obviously we were at the game rather than watching it on TV, we didn't see it at all. I only saw it. I think someone sent it in a social media message to me, and then I saw it like properly this morning. Yeah, not nice. And presumably Spurs, when it's all been, I don't know why Spurs haven't commented on it yet, to be honest. But maybe they're just waiting for Chelsea to do their investigation first, and they'll come down on it. Because they should. Rubbish, horrible stuff. Talking about signings, going back to that, I did ask Conte about Destiny Udogie. He obviously his deal was done. 19-year-old heading back to Udinese for the season, and very talented young man. And here's what he said about him. I asked him, what did I say? I said the question was phrased. So Destiny Udogie, obviously a player for the future, but what do you think of him as a player right now? And Conte said, you said it well. He's a player for the future. I think he's a good prospect for Tottenham because we're talking about a young player. For sure, this player needs to develop like Spence, and in my opinion, a good investment for the club. Now he continues to play in this season with Udinese, and in this way he has the possibility to play regularly. When you are young, you need to play to improve your experience. For sure, we're talking about a good prospect, but we are talking about a player for the future, not for the present. He has to develop and to grow with a group of players with more experience. So, in that, I think he's definitely talking about Destiny Udogie, but I think in the same breath, he's also talking about Djed Spence. I think I referred to this in the last video. There was a big kind of slight, in my mind, overreaction to Spence not being in the squad. Spence may not be in the squad tomorrow for Wolves as well. I don't know, by the way. I don't know. Personally, team-wise, I probably think we'll see Sanchez in for Romero and probably Perisic in for Cess. I think. I'd say that's probably what I'd expect to see. But in terms of the squad and the bench, depends, I guess, whether Brian Hill is heading out or whether he's indicated a desire to head out, which I'd imagine he will because he wants to play regularly. Other than that, it may be that Spence isn't on the bench again. And I explained before, it's all about, in terms of the balancing that bench, you really don't need 4 wing-backs that could be on there. 4 right wing-backs alone, and Spence, Doherty, Lucas Moura, and obviously Perisic can play there as well as a right wing-back if needed. So I don't think that was necessary. I think it was more of a balance for Richarlison to come in, obviously, from suspension, and then Hill to stay in there, so you had 3 attacking options. If anything, I'd argue they only had 1 central midfielder in Bissouma. They didn't actually cover that position. So, I wouldn't, maybe you could argue that Sarr was the one that should have been on there as well. But with Spence, he's a very young guy. Fun enough, if you subscribe to my newsletter that I do for work, I've written an article about Spence, which I'll chuck online as well tomorrow. And essentially saying, I think just be calm. Be calm. I'm speaking to people around him again this week. And there's no desire to head out on loan whatsoever or anything like that. I don't know if he could go to another English club. No, it would have to be abroad. I don't know how that works if you've registered for another club anyway. But no, there's no desire to that. We spoke to Tom Barkley and I from The Sun spoke to Djed out in Israel. And he's a very, how do I put this? He knows what he wants. He knows what he wants, and he understands exactly what his, I guess, where he's at stage-wise. Because, we're talking about Destiny Udogie there. Destiny Udogie has had a full season last season in Serie A, playing in the top level, in the top flight. Yes, he's 2 years younger than Djed is, but Djed Spence hasn't actually played in the top flight yet, in terms of any of that. He's played, obviously, FA Cup matches against Liverpool, Leicester, Arsenal last season. He also played against Spurs as well, I think the previous season. Obviously, he was on loan at Forest last season, but I'm sure he played against Spurs in for Middlesbrough in the FA Cup, because I remember seeing him and Cess up against each other, obviously good mates. But yeah, even though he's 2 years older, he's actually far less experienced than Destiny Udogie is in terms of top flight experience. So he knows, and he told us out there in Israel, it's like, obviously I don't want to wait forever, but I know I've got to be patient. And so he knows where he's at, and he knows that for a wing back in a Conte system, you've got to be very different to a wing back in most other kind of teams. You've got to be ridiculously fit, because you've got to be able to be a defender one moment and then the next moment be an auxiliary striker at the other end of the pitch. It's really one of the toughest roles in football, I'd say, being a Conte wing-back. And just understanding exactly what he wants from you, your position-wise as well, and the runs and the movement and everything. And that's why Perisic is being very much kind of like a mentor and a tutor to both Sessegnon and Djed Spence as well, just to kind of let them know, look, lads, I've done this. I know what it's like to be a wing-back under Conte and what he wants. So, and even Perisic, this is the thing about being patient. Perisic, like I say, I think he probably will start tomorrow, but he hasn't started yet. And even Conte's been saying he's not the Perisic I know yet. So if you're a 33-year-old Croatian that's won Serie A with Conte, has won two Bundesliga titles with both Bayern and Dortmund, and has won the Champions League, and still Conte's saying, no, you're not ready yet. If you're Djed Spence, you've got to wait, and he won't be under any illusions about this. I understand that, Conte's saying in Korea to us that, he's a club signing, albeit he did, and people forget this bit, he did say, but I what was it he said? I'm probably going to mess up the words because it feels like an age ago now. But he essentially said, he's someone I've seen he has shown he can become an important player for Tottenham, something like that, or a very good player for Tottenham. So it's not like he would not sign off on any player he doesn't want. This is Antonio Conte. We know what he's like. If there's a player he didn't want, he would very much make that clear. So there's no element of, he's leaving out of the squad to make a point or anything like that whatsoever. I think it's just the case where, you've still got the three wing-backs in total there, and they're on the right. I don't know what's happening. I don't get the impression Emerson wants to go anywhere. I haven't listened to it yet, but I saw he's just done an interview with Spurs Play. All seems to be very lovey-dovey about Spurs as well from the little snippet I saw. Whether there will still be three right wing-backs by the end of this window or not, we'll see. I think all of us felt Emerson was a bit nailed on to go. I do wonder whether if Matt Doherty's knee, if he didn't have that knee injury and he came into this season absolutely pain-free and at a great place fitness-wise, he probably would have started the first two games, and then maybe Emerson would have been a slightly different kind of mental state, I guess, maybe feeling like, maybe I'm not going to play many matches this season and they've just brought in another wing-back. But as it stands, he's probably thinking, well, I've started the first two games, chaps, and, probably going to start the third one against Wolves as well, so why would I want to go anywhere? I understand that, and I just wonder whether it would just have to take a big bid from or a decent bid for Spurs to go, okay, then maybe we will. And even then, it'd have to be a good kind of sell, I guess, for Emerson to go as well. So, yeah, Djed Spence will get minutes. He will. Those two, Doherty and Emerson, they're the trusted ones at the moment, but they will get injuries, they will miss games, and I think Djed Spence will just be given chances. What I've seen from Conte, if you work hard in training and impress him, he will give you your moments. And then you have to take those moments and impress. So, yeah, I won't worry about Djed Spence. He knows exactly kind of what he's got himself into. And I still believe that, I've said this before, that he was signed very much with Conte in mind. They felt that all of his attributes fitted a Conte wing-back. And I was told by someone within the club that he's not the kind of player, maybe, that they would have signed for that, like a right-back role for previous managers. He very much is a Conte-tailored one. And practically went and watched him a few times last season as well. So he had properly ran the rule over him. So he would not have pushed that move himself if they, if there was any concern about that, he would be absolutely class in the future. So, don't worry too much about Djed Spence. We'll come back to this in January and we'll see what he's done and where he's at. And whether then there needs to be some kind of like brief loan just to kind of kick him on. But my gut feeling, and this is one of these where people will come back to this, my gut feeling is that I think he will make an impression on someone. He will get his chance and he will take it. And we'll hear Conte raving about him, but saying he still needs to keep improving. That's my gut feeling. Talk about the future. I can do the loan roundup. I didn't do the loan roundup last week because it was all a bit... And actually, it was a bit busy. But I'm also glad I didn't do it because they had a few midweek matches, which means I can get those in. And give us some nice little moments as well. Talking about a player for the future, Dane Scarlett. So he hasn't scored yet for Portsmouth. I think he's played 5 matches. But he's getting a lot of praise. And the Portsmouth fans are starting to really take to him because he's working incredibly hard, which is, I know, the basic for footballers. But it's always good to see... Especially sometimes teams in League One, League Two, they might see Premier League players come down and think that they, everything should be built around them. They don't have to do anything. And Dane Scarlett has gone in with a brilliant attitude. And there was a lovely moment which you may have seen on social media. It had more than 100,000 views when I saw it. Of Dane Scarlett got substituted in their game against Cambridge United. They were winning. They won it 4-1. He played 63 minutes. And in the 63rd minute, he came off, but he went on the opposite side to the dugout. So it meant he had to do a little walk of honour, as it were, around. And as he got around the stand behind the goal, the fans just all started to sing, Super Dane, Super Dane, Super Dane Scarlett. And it was really lovely. He was applauding them back. You could see he probably felt part of it. And he felt what it was like to be kind of really, I guess, loved. I'm not saying the Spurs fans don't love him, but he's still very much... He's one for the future. Whereas at Portsmouth, I think they can tell how good he's going to be. And Danny Cowley, the Portsmouth boss, who, funnily enough, I used to talk to back when he was Braintree town manager, back in my non-league reporting days. He's a very clever guy. And I'm not shocked at all that he's risen from the... he used to be at... Was it Canvey Island, I think he used to be at? Way back, way down the non-league levels. And now he is... a League One manager, and I wouldn't be shocked if he takes them probably back into the Championship as well. So, if Danny Cowley is excited about a player, he's a terrific player. So this is what Danny Cowley said in the week about Dane. I think Dane, against the ball, is wow. For an 18-year-old, his understanding of how to defend from the front and the speed and aggression that he can go and press the ball, it's like he's got the eye of the tiger. Sorry, I should say this was quoted. He was quoted as saying this in the Portsmouth News, just to give them their credit. He's got this ruthless streak to his game, both against the ball, how quickly he gets up to it, but also then his movement and his reactive quality. In training, he's looked really exciting, and it's lovely from our perspective. We're so privileged to be able to wake up every morning and be able to come in and watch such a young talent grow and develop. It's just class, and I love stuff like that. I love seeing young players develop in the game. And when you've got a manager like Danny who absolutely knows how to work with young players, he's developed so many of them over the years at different levels. And just to hear him so excited about working with him in the first place is brilliant. Honestly, Dane Scarlett will come back to Tottenham next summer a far, far better player than when he left. He will be so much more developed, and the goals will come. I'm pretty sure with Dane, when the first goal comes, the rest will just fly in afterwards. A bit like Troy Parrott had at MK Dons last season. Once the goals started to flow, they didn't really stop. And we'll talk about Troy in a minute as well. But the good thing about Danny Cowley as well is he doesn't really care about whether you're a young player or not. Essentially puts you out there if you're good enough. And there's a nice little quote here that he also said when he was talking about not being worried about throwing this 18-year-old striker into matches in League One. Age is just a number to me. I just pick the team on what I see, really. It's always on competence. Yes, of course, experienced players, you can't replicate 500 games. Any good professional will be much better after 500 games than they are after their first game. But also, on their first game, they bring an energy and enthusiasm and youthful exuberance, which can be very powerful too. And it's brilliant. And that's, keep a close eye on Dane. Don't worry, I'll keep you updated on him because he is going to be an absolute star for the future. When you've got Jose Mourinho, Conte, Nuno as well in the middle of those two, all saying what an incredible talent Dane is going to be, you listen. And like I say, Danny Cowley is a man who certainly knows his players as well. Joe Rodon. Let's talk about Joe Rodon. Joe Rodon had such an unfortunate moment at the weekend for Rennes. And it was of none of his own making or fault whatsoever. So Rennes were playing against Monaco. 1-1 was the final score. Monaco played for almost 75 minutes with 10 men. Youssef Fofana got sent off. So if you weren't aware, Joe Rodon moved to Rennes on loan, but with an option, a €20 million option to buy, £16.8 million. And if you're wondering why he went to Rennes, it's because Rennes, one of the most scouted teams in Europe. Them and Ajax, very, very heavily scouted because of the amount, their recruitment and their development is just amazing at Rennes. And that was why so many players of theirs have then made a big move onwards. But what happened with Joe Rodon at the weekend in the 72nd minute, so Rennes were a goal up. He passed the ball back to the substitute goalkeeper, Dogan Alemdar, who took an extra touch, then looked up, and he had no time to do any of those things. He just really had to clear it. And he was closed down by Briel Embolo, who he was quite the big kind of young thing, wasn't he? Was he a Swiss striker, I think? And he just went in and tackled the goalkeeper and put the ball backwards into the net behind him. So it was absolutely nothing to do with Joe Rodon. But obviously he played the pass to the goalkeeper, so he's involved in all the clips that you see. What I find so funny about watching Joe Rodon play, and he was like this at Spurs as well, he does not stop moaning at every single person around him. He is a proper moaner. In terms of, I guess in a captain's kind of way, in terms of, he's not the captain there, but in terms of, I don't think he's ever been worried about being a young player that tells anyone else what to do. And he was the same at Spurs. I would watch him whinging away, even like Hugo and like experienced players at Spurs, if things hadn't been done properly in the situation. And I was watching an extended kind of highlights of that Rennes Monaco game, and just all the time you could see him just turning to people like, "What are you doing?" kind of thing. I just find that fascinating. And from all kind of word, it seems to be that he's settled in very well. Well, like I say, 290 minutes in his first two games. He will play pretty much every game by the sounds of it. And I'm sure his performances will get better and better the sharper he gets as well. And just a little quote from Olivier Cloarec, Rennes general manager, when he signed Rennes. That is Rennes. He is a player who has a lot of desire and is happy to arrive in Rennes. He will bring aggression to our defence. It was one of the points that we wanted to improve compared to last season. Joe fulfills all the criteria the profile sought. As an international, he needs to play. He also contributed a lot to qualification of Wales for the World Cup. He is a true leader on the field. That's kind of what I mean when you can see he's constantly talking. And it's not, I'm painting that as if he's just negative. I'm sure he's giving them praise as well when they do good things alongside him. But I just love the fact that he's, 24 now? And he's probably bossing around a lot of older players there as well. But yeah, hopefully he'll have a terrific season and a very good World Cup as well. Troy Parrott, who I mentioned earlier. Troy has got a lot of praise this week. A lot of praise. He scored his first goal for Preston last week. But then he didn't score in his two games this week, but he got a fair bit of praise for them. He got a very impressive 90 minutes in the 1-0 win against Luton at the weekend. And then he played 88 minutes in a 0-0 draw against Rotherham. And John Veal from the Press Association, you may know, he obviously knows Spurs and Rotherham very well. He is a Rotherham lad. He watched the Rotherham Preston game and he said Troy was superb. He said he was just constantly probably one of the most dangerous people on the pitch. Just maybe his finishing let him down slightly, but he was a constant nuisance. And every time he got the ball, like Rotherham were worried something was going to happen. And that's just showing his development really nicely. I took down... So he got a 7 from Lancs Live, the local paper, in the midweek game against Rotherham. Some nice little praise as well. Essentially saying the same thing. Finishing touch was lacking, but work rate and link-up play very good again. For the performance against Luton, he got an 8. And the review said, a tireless and selfless display from Para up top was a focal point for Preston all game and linked play up fantastically. Never stopped making himself available and running for the team. Had a chance to kill the match at the end. And I also read a nice little interview with Ryan Ledson, the Preston midfielder, and he said he was very impressed with Troy and how he's been since he's come in as well. So it's brilliant for him. That little kind of wake-up moment, I feel like halfway through last season with MK Dons, when he just realised, had a chat with all the important people in his life and just realised, I need to really kick on now. I need to give my absolute everything to this. And we're seeing the results of this now. Had a good chat with Troy out in Korea, wasn't it? So many pre-season activities that I'm forgetting where I spoke to and who. Had a good chat with him in Korea, and you could tell he's a guy that knows where he's going now. He really does. Which is 20 years old. Yeah, he's on the right path now. And, he wants to come back next summer and properly challenge for a place at Spurs. And he continues on that trajectory. Him and Dane, I tell you what, I just wonder whether there's a little kind of feeling at Spurs. Do they not sign another natural striker because of how good Dane and potentially Troy could be next summer? And Richarlison can obviously cover that position as well, but who knows? Conte might want someone for the now, and they may move if there's an opportunity that arises. It's just too good to turn down. Very good from Troy. Alfie Whiteman is also out on loan, Spurs goalkeeper, 23-year-old. He went back to Degerfors in Sweden. They're struggling a little bit. They, only just stayed up on the last day last season, and he played his part in that and keeping them up as well. So far this season, which has been going since April, I think he's made 16 appearances, so getting lots of game time. They drew 1-1 to Varbergs at the weekend on Sunday. They're 14th at the moment in that 16-team league. So, another tough season, but it's all good for him, I think, for experience. I just wonder, I wonder whether Alfie maybe is now past that point where he maybe won't become... or maybe won't become a Tottenham goalkeeper of the future. I guess a first choice or even a second choice. We're maybe past that point. But all of this will help him for his what comes next for him. Because he is a very good keeper. It's very difficult to get keepers' loans. I was always told that by people in football. They're the most difficult position to get a loan in. Because a lot of clubs lower down the pyramid don't want to take chances on young, inexperienced keepers. But then there's also a certain level where you kind of want them to be performing at. And you want them to play every week. It's a very, very difficult because there's only one slot for that position, isn't there? Whereas defenders, in every role pretty much, there's competition that you can get in there. Whereas with a goalkeeper, often they have their set number one. So, yeah. So there you go. I was actually planning to do a Q&A, but I realised I've kind of spoken for a little bit. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do about 10 minutes worth of questions as well, because I did ask you to put in questions. Now I feel bad. So let me have a little look at some of the questions you put underneath. I will make up for it, and I will do probably a Q&A in the middle of next week, maybe next Wednesday. Hopefully should be able to do a post-match video on Sunday or Monday talking about... the Wolves match and more stuff from that. But let's answer some questions quickly. Everett Rees asks, how do you think Spurs' poorer than expected performance against Chelsea impacts the plans for the final weeks of the transfer window before it slams shut? Also, why does the transfer window slam shut? We always know when it's going to end. It's never a surprise. Nobody suddenly slams it shut on us. Yeah, I think we've always said that. It's a dramatic effect. I think that's all it is. In terms of the Chelsea performance, it's a tough one really, because I felt attacking wise he had a lot of options. I think maybe defensively it just showed them that perhaps they could need another body there with Longley not being available. We'll see. I wouldn't say the performance so much, because I do think that Spurs were it was a bit of a mentality thing. And I do think grabbing that late equaliser, although I know Conte doesn't want really people to celebrate draws, but I do feel like that mentality-wise will have helped them a lot going forward. So I don't know whether directly that performance will impact their transfer window plans, but I think more so if any of those players do head out the door like Hill and Tanganga. Right, what else we got here? Someone's every so often people comment on the video where I was really annoyed at Spurs for the Conte talks collapsing last summer, and it's quite funny. It obviously comes up on the timeline because it's got Conte in the headline, and they always comment like Jikamos says, "Ali, how are you feeling now, mate? Hope much better. Come on, you Spurs." Which is quite funny a year later. Let's have a look. What else we got? Leon Patmore asks, how do you get an interview with a player or backroom staff? Do you approach the club and ask for person A or B, or do you get offered to have an interview by the club? There's many, many different ways, to be honest with you. On the tour, we certainly asked for certain players that we wanted, or all the various tours. There will be times when certain players will be at events and we'll get offered them. So what Spurs will do is they'll have a player going out and doing good things in the community, let's say, and as a kind of in a way to promote it, they will offer those videos out. And we all kind of take our turns. You'll see we'll get one-to-one interviews once in a while, and they're normally nice sit-down featurey types. Who have I got in the past with those? I've got loads of those. I sat down with Jaffet Tanganga. I've done a couple of times. Tanguy Dembele, Serge Aurier when he first came as well. God, there's so many that aren't even coming into my mind. I've done Skippy a couple of times. Juan Foyth. They're really enjoyable because with these players, when they're quite comfortable, especially after they've got a little bit of adrenaline when they've done they've spoken to a classroom full of kids or something, and they're suddenly kind of just speaking about football is probably less scary than having to talk to a classroom of kids or whatever. And they're suddenly much more comfortable, and yeah, they're the best chats. Whereas in a mixed zone after a game, it can be a bit cliched, and that's very much just grabbing whoever goes by, and it can be, it's more kind of your standard fare. Whereas when you actually get to properly sit down with them, you get some really interesting stuff. So yeah, that's how it works really. We do make requests. I often will request players for some point in the season, maybe staff members that I want to talk to, players out on loan. Often if a player's out on loan, you also have to kind of ask for permission from Spurs as well as the club they're out on loan at. Otherwise, the loan club just goes, have you spoken to Spurs? So you have to kind of do that. So I've got a few of those that are kind of hopefully in the mix in the months to come as well. What else we got? Hazel Tufton asks, what's happening with Winks? He seems to have gone off the radar. I'm pretty sure Harry Winks will leave the club by the end of this window because it serves nobody any good if he sticks around himself or the club. So yeah, he'll head off somewhere. Be intrigued to see that there's a Spanish links. His grandmother's Spanish, isn't she? I think he speaks Spanish. I can't 100% confirm that, but I'd imagine he's got a decent knowledge of it. So yeah, there's always little Spanish links that crop up with Winks. So whether he ends up going to Spain, we'll see. Funny enough, I think Valencia have been linked with him in the past as well. I've looked at him seriously. So yeah, we'll see. With Winks, maybe it'll be that it could be a loan, get another loan. I think Spurs just want to get these players out the door, so it could be a loan. Yeah, we'll see with Winks. We'll see. Like I say, what we're on the 19th. So you've still got another 12 days or so of the window. There's plenty of time. I think there'll be a lot of interest in him as the window goes on because he's also a homegrown player, which essentially for English clubs as well, is a big thing right now, as Spurs are going to find out as well. Because I said it before about the homegrown numbers. Spurs, even with Tonguy's exit, are still 2 over in their Champions League squad. So if you presume Reguilon goes, still leaves you that one. Whether that's Sarr or Hill, and if Hill goes, then yeah, you're left with Sarr, and that is maybe why maybe they do decide to let Sarr and Hill both go out because it leaves one spot for another foreign player to come in. We'll see. It's a balancing act, it really is. Let's have a little look. What else we got? Alan Watson asks, regarding when clubs announce transfers, why are some fees disclosed and others are undisclosed? Often it's to do with sometimes foreign clubs. They will disclose them. Sometimes, and English clubs don't really. Sometimes it will be if you've got to announce it to the stock market. That can be another thing as well. Spurs on the whole don't disclose them. We kind of have to do a bit of digging to find them out. They don't often do that. That's the answer really to that one. Let's have a look what else we got. Garrett Burton asks, do you think Tottenham should be looking at a longer-term replacement for Lloris? I know everyone says he's one of the best in the Premier League, but the World Cup win was 4 years ago and he's getting up there in age. Do you think they would stick with backup goalies like Forster or splash on a more expensive, brighter prospect? I think that's one for next summer. I'm sure they'll be looking at these young goalkeepers now. But for right now, Hugo Lloris is more than up to the job. And the fact that he's on a 2-year deal suggests that they think, that he's definitely going to be at the top of his game. He's a very fit guy. And his reflexes don't seem to have dulled at all. So I think that is one for next season when they start to look at that potential successor. And that may not even be for that season. It may be for someone for the next summer after that. What else we got? Another 5 minutes. No, another few. Lots of people asking about Harry Winks. Stephen Lloyd says, with the outs being very slow, is this when Paratici was signing? The noise was he was great at getting players in, but not so great at getting them out. Or is it just the deals were so bad on the players it's almost impossible to sell them? Yeah, I remember being told that by people in Italy, that his track record at Juventus was really good at getting players in the door, but not so much in getting them out if they proved to be a mistake or just the next manager didn't like them or stuff. And often it was to do with the finances. I'd say Spurs are moving the players pretty quickly out the door now. Obviously, you've had Bergwijn, Lo Celso on Dembele. Joey Rodon's gone out on loan to Joey again. I don't know why I keep calling him Joey. Who else we had? Cameron Carter-Vickers has obviously gone as well. Keanu Tete's left. Troy Parrott and Dane Scarlett on loan. There's been a fair few outgoings. I do think there's always going to be a slight issue with, despite the criticism that comes their way about wages, I do think the Spurs pay their players quite well. And I think you see a lot of the foreign clubs struggle to match that. Maybe they pay players that are further down the squad importance level too much. I don't know. Obviously, it's difficult. When you've got Giovanni Lo Celso and Tongi and Dembele, obviously they were brought in as star players. So, yeah, I think there's an element to that as well, of getting them out the door. And that's why we're seeing just loan moves approved at the moment. Joshua Postlewaite asks, would you rather have to try to get the ball off a prime Dembele or try to get the ball past Romero? I guess probably Dembele, because you're not going to get hurt as much as you probably would with Romero. I don't think I succeed in either way because they're both absolutely superb in their positions. But yeah, with Dembele, I'd probably just fail to tackle him, whereas trying to get past Romero, I'm probably going to get crunched as I go past him. What else we got? Richard Pugh asks, with all talk of us getting a creative midfielder like Maddison, why are we not giving Harvey White a chance? I see so much good in him, and he certainly deserves the opportunity at least. Yeah, I think Harvey White's a terrific young player as well. He is 20 now, so he's at that age where he really needs to get a chance. He's one of those that I really think he needs a loan, but I just wonder whether the homegrown element and the fact that, I think I said this in the last video, you need to have 4 club-trained players in your Champions League squad. And that you have to. There's no kind of getting away. You have to have 4 club-trained players. I just wonder whether he ends up becoming one of those nominated players in that, and that stops him heading out on loan. But yeah, it could be another season where he doesn't get a lot of game time. That's the only problem. Martin Hanna asks, have you ever been to Belfast? If so, what do you think of our wee city? I have not been to Belfast. I would love to go there. I watched the movie Belfast on one of the trips. I think it was to Korea. I watched it on the flight. Very good film. Sir Kenneth Branagh directing, a Tottenham fan who I've seen at the stadium going absolutely mad and passionately mad about Spurs. Big Spurs fan. What else we got? I'll do one more and then I'll head off. Sean Slater asked, do you believe Conte has found a home now and he has a place where he wants to stick around because he's talking a lot more about the future and it doesn't associate the club himself as separate like at the beginning, he says it more as one. Also, surely players signing for him would think he is sticking around. Yeah, you've heard me say this in the past. I've said that I did feel there was a point last season when he switched from saying Tottenham and they and the club to we and us. I do feel that I'd hope that the reason behind a growing connection is the fact that it's being built around him and he is very much responsible. He's achieved a terrific thing. It's taken a club that was really no one would have tipped to be a top four side and they finished in fourth place. He convinced the club to change their ways in the Champions League. The transfers window. They signed 6 players before their second friendly, which is just ridiculous. That's not what Tottenham do. No, before their third friendly, sorry. That's just not what Tottenham do whatsoever. And a fair old chunk of them were in before pre-season even kicked off. The first 3 definitely were. I'd hope that he feels a club that is very much got Antonio Conte's fingerprints and stamp all over it. I'd hope that's why he might feel a bit more of a connection with it than many of his other clubs in the past, because he's not just a passing presence there. He's actually been able to dictate how the club runs. And that, I guess, even just from an ego perspective, that's a good thing for him, and he can feel that he is, he's making a difference. And it is Antonio Conte's Tottenham Hotspur. So I think that's probably where it comes from. And like I say, the likes of Destiny Udogie signing for Conte, and saying that very clearly, even though they're not going to be here till next summer, it does point to the future. Look, we all know he's an emotional man. We all know that it could go sideways at any point, and none of us are denying that. But right now, he seems very happy, and everyone at Spurs seems very happy with him. The players are really responding to him. And yeah, even in press conference, he laughs in every press conference. There's always a moment where he has a chuckle. He's very happy right now. That can all change with a couple of bad results, but yeah, I think you're right, Sean. I do. I think he kind of feels like he's got a home right now. I'd be interested to see when his daughter will be finishing the next level kind of her school. I think that will be next summer. So that'll be an interesting one. And then, maybe whether his family then come over to the UK to live with him, because at the moment he is like, any spare day they get, he is jetting. If it's after a match, he will jet out straight after that match to go to Italy, or he'll have them over and fly back with them for a day and then come back for training. He's very much fitting in these moments with his family wherever he can, because his daughter, I think she's 16, is obviously quite young, and you don't want to miss those moments in her life. So yeah, it'd be interesting maybe next summer to see what they decide and whether maybe that will have some kind of part in his future. Obviously, we know there's the option for, if both him and Spurs agree, to continue to chuck another year on his contract, which I'd be stunned if that doesn't happen, because I think Spurs will want it at this stage. Also to kind of stop any questions as this season goes on about him, but also for Conte, it's a little bit more financial security. I know he says he told me, I asked him about his contract. He said, I'm not bothered about. I asked him that in Israel. He said, I'm not bothered about finance. I'm not bothered about contract. It's not important to me. I just need to feel happy, which leads back to this question as well. But yeah, we'll see. Next summer will be an interesting one. Let's get there first, and hopefully, we get there. And but if we do, it should hopefully mean he's been quite happy with what's going. And if I was him, he'll have had 3 transfer windows by then to start shaping the squad that he really wants. And I think if Spurs resembles what if Spurs resembles what Antonio Conte wants, it will be a very successful Tottenham Hotspur. I do think that. So fingers crossed that he does feel at home. Right. I'm going to try to come back to the rest of the questions that are underneath this next Wednesday. But feel free to chuck more questions in as well if you want, and I'll do those as well. I'll try and do a few Q&As in the coming weeks. But there you go. Right, Wolves tomorrow. Like I said, I'll do a video in a few days' time. I think we'll have plenty to discuss. So, yeah. Right, I'm going to head off there. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.